Hello, friends. Welcome to Body of Knowledge, where we believe that the body helps make knowledge. Today is July 3rd. I am 3 days past due of my June reading wrap-up, so that's what we're going to do today. A little bit late because my focus has not been on this. And this is my second time recording this because the first time my focus was not on this. So I'm gonna go slowly. Remember, you can always 2x time me to make me go faster. I just want to sit and be in my body, remain in my body as I do this video. It's something I try to remember all the time, but has been especially present this week. And let's just do that together. Taking a deep breath, feeling the body in the seat, in the chair, a little bit of movement coming back into the body with me. Okay, we're here, we're present. I hope my microphone is working. I can't actually tell from the recordings if it is or is not. Okay, June reading wrap up. I'm gonna start with Heir of Fire by Sarah J. Maas. I do have some things to talk about in that series, but as there are more books to come, and given my brain wanting to be elsewhere, I will save that for the next video. Hopefully, that's what I said the last video. We'll see. Then I read Returning the Self to Nature by Jeanine M. Canty. That was the one that I read that had been recommended by someone, and then we chatted and realized he thought he was recommending a different book. I did not like that book. I thought the focus on narcissism was too much, especially given that the author sets up in pretty early on that she's not a clinical psychologist who can diagnose narcissism. I'm also I study pleasure, right? I'm about using pleasure, using what feels good to affect change. I'm all about moving towards what we want rather than just away from what we don't want, to misquote Stacey Haynes. And this really felt like such a focus on moving away from what we don't want. And I had just spent a week at the Nature Institute developing relationship with plants, developing an erotic relationship with a grapevine that I spent the week with and wrote erotic poetry to. And it was so good and so pleasurable and so soft and gentle, and it was about encounter. And so then to read this book that is just like, we're all narcissists, so we gotta stop that. I was like, that might be true. I wouldn't say it is, but I don't have the expertise to say it's not. But there's a better path forward. And also I had just watched the new Mary Oliver documentary, which is this other experience that the subtitle is like Saved by the Beauty of the World. And I was like, I want to talk about beauty. I want to talk about pleasure. I want to talk about presence. And I want to talk about narcissism, which is a result if we are collectively narcissistic. It's about being self-focused because we are living under systems of oppression that do not want us to thrive. Like, we are struggling already without this added guilt burden on top of us. Anyways, then I read The Future That Was, A History of Third World Feminism Against Authoritarianism by Durba, Mitra. This was talking about, I believe it was the 70s, so like 50 years ago, this influx of feminist thought into the academy, bringing in the third world into scholarship, talking about the changes that were made and then retracted, able now 50 years later to bring in some critiques of what was happening at the time, and it was a really good and critical look that I appreciated. Very academic. It's I think from an academic press, an academic book about academia, so it's a very niche audience. But if you're in that audience, maybe worth checking out. Then I read The Flowering Wand by Sophie Strand, and this is, I don't want to say supposedly, but on the cover, it's a book about masculinity, let's say. But really, the message of that book is about kind of breaking down that masculine, feminine binary. It's about talking about these fluid genders, and mostly I think it's about undoing the rigid binary that this is what masculine is, and then bringing in myths and stories and ecology to talk about how we can all, not just people who identify as men, we can all approach masculinity different. I did like that one. Sophie Strand narrated it. I like her narrating her nonfiction books better, in any case. Then I read Wired for Dating by Stan Tatkin, because I am trying to do dating differently. I'm trying to bring in everything that I have learned in the past experiences, not always the best, and to show up as what Stan Tatkin would refer to as an anchor. I'm sure you've heard of attachment styles. He has the anchor is the secure attachment. The wave is anxious, and then the island is avoidant. So a little easier to swallow being an anchor or a wave or an island versus avoidant or anxious. Yeah. What I really like, and I had read this book before, maybe a year or two ago, what I really like about this book is there's a lot of talk about codependency, and like we don't want to be codependent on anyone in our life, right? What's talked about less is being interdependent, because we are not solo in the world. We're always in relationship to the world around us. In perhaps an extreme take, I don't know, perhaps, but Stan Tatkin says you and your partner, so again, dealing with primarily only actually monogamous relationships, you and your partner should create a couple bubble, and you should be always tending to their nervous system, and they should always be tending to yours. You should be able to count on them for anything 24/7, and then give that in return. And it's this reciprocity in romantic relationships that I really haven't seen in other like dating advice, in the dating advice genre, let's say. And I think that's so interesting to think about. Like the times, oftentimes when we need our nervous system tended the most, that's when we like are the least likely to remember all of our training and tools and practices. And so to have somebody there who you have developed enough intimacy with, who can recognize that and give you a tool or tools or something, I just think it's a really beautiful view of relationships, and definitely is something that colors like what it is that I want and what it is that I'm looking for. Like I want that level of intimacy. I want that level of interdependence. And not everyone wants that, and not everyone's looking for that. So that was really helpful for me in figuring out what it is I want, so that I can like better filter out who can't give me what it is that I want and need. Okay. I did not finish, even though I was so excited about it, The Body Toward an Eastern Mind-Body Theory by Yuasa Yasuo. As I was reading more of it and getting into all the philosophers, the Eastern philosophers, and all of these conceptions of the body and all of that, I realized the most exciting part for me was in the introduction, and just understanding more of the underlying assumptions of what's going on. And, I have so much to read, and I just stopped. I stopped reading it. I was at the Nature Institute, like that first day I was there, I was like, okay, I'm going to get through my 25 pages. And I did. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to step away. And stepping away made me realize, like, there's a lot. It's a book that I would like to return to later when I have time. But right now, I have other things to read. Then I read Epistemologies of the South, Justice Against Epistemicide by Boaventura de Sousa Santos. I am excited about this book. It's really about cognitive justice. It's talked about in different ways. The Yasuo book talks about it, how like Western philosophy tends to stick with Western philosophy, where like German philosophy will stick with German philosophy, is kind of what I think he was getting at, because then he says in Eastern philosophy that there's a tendency to go to explore the entirety of the East, so bringing in maybe Hindu philosophies and Buddhist philosophies and just understanding more of that larger region than just the specialty. Then Boaventura de Sousa Santos brings it even further and says, especially these imperialist cultures, colonial cultures, they are not only creating this kind of epistemical bubble. He uses that term epistemicide, actively killing off other ways of knowing, other ways of being, and that as a part of having justice, we need to have cognitive justice. And this was not in this book. It was in another paper I read about sentir pensar, which is a Latin American concept of thinking and feeling being in tandem, going hand in hand, not the dualism. And in this paper, it was mestiza scholar, part Spanish, part indigenous, and she brought in something so interesting, because I feel like I have said this or heard it in a respectful way, and then she said, it's not really that respectful. There's some disrespect there. It was saying like the West has science and then indigenous people have wisdom, and like why do they have to be split that way, and that it could be seen as a kind of like underhanded compliment. I thought that was so interesting, because I think it was meant to be like like a compliment, or like I don't know, I don't have the words right now. But that's within that idea of epistemicide against epistemologies of the South. Super interesting. Also, still thinking about how do I bring that in to my scholarship without being extractive, while still being in right relationship. It's I don't think that can be answered in total. I think it happens moment by moment as we go. Then I read Thinking Like a Plant by Craig Holdrege. Craig Holdrege is one of the founders of the Nature Institute, and this was one of our texts for the Gertian Phenomenology class, which we finished our week intensive in person, and then we have 2 more Zoom classes to go. And it was interesting because I feel like in a lot of ways it was kind of re-narration of what I experienced at the Nature Institute. But I also felt like in this book there was more of that push towards, I think someone else I was talking to, and I can't remember who, said like this push towards soul, this push towards that I thou relationship, rather like it was hinted at this kind of animism or this kind of different worldview, but I feel like we never quite got out of like the science, and this book kind of went a little more towards that. And then lastly, I read Mating in Captivity by Esther Perel. I didn't realize this book was 20 years old until I saw a video, an interview. I didn't actually see it. I saw the YouTube thumbnail, like Esther Perel 20 years later on Mating in Captivity. That book is really for people in established relationships, like long established, to the point that maybe your intimate life is less intimate than you want it to be. But it still was helpful. I think in my last relationship, I really realized how easy it is to take someone for granted, to be taken for granted, and how hard that is to come back from. So like reading Mating in Captivity just made me think, like, again, of what do I want in a relationship? I know that I want more than what most people want. Like, I know the Ursula Le Guin quote, love is like bread, it has to be made fresh daily. Like, I want somebody who is interested in intimacy and maintaining that intimacy of, like, we know, like, we think when we're like in the honeymoon phase and in the hormones and all the things, like, this love is different, this love is special, we're not like all the others. And then you have all of these documented cases of all the people who thought that, and they're like, and now we never have sex, and either do or do not come back from that. And so wanting a partner who also recognizes that we might be feeling this amazing chemistry, this amazing love now, and also if we don't make this fresh daily, it's not going to last. And it can last. I don't have the source for this. I just remember an interview I was watching where somebody said they've done brain scans on people who do these practices of like making their love fresh daily, and do like the MRI scans 20 years later, and their brains are still firing the same way of the people who are newly in love. So relationships, I don't want to say relationships are work, because I'm kind of anti-work. Relationships are labors of love. Bringing in the Lewis Hyde distinction between work and labor there. Yeah, anyways, I'm going to stop so my brain can return. My brain can return to doing the things that it actually wants to do. I'm going to have to do a new update on my comprehensive exam because it is all like fallen apart and come back together again. Just like this process is an ego death daily. But it's better. I feel better about the scope, and that has freed up so much of my time and energy that I am finally getting to what I have said I've been going to do for a very long time, which is, I've got my little paper up here. You can't see anything because of the color of the markers. I am going to turn how did I have this set up? I'm going to turn, I'm just going to hold it. I'm going to turn my master's theses to the both of them in tandem, I'm going to turn them into a course, which is really so much about what I was talking about, my critique of that Returning the Self to Nature book. Like, how do we do change while feeling good? Using pleasure, using eros. I'm going to announce it here. You heard it first, or like third, but the title of the course is going to be Erotic Ripening, and I am so excited about it. It makes me feel so juicy and alive and good, and yes. I really have to end this video because I am feeling like my brain wants to do other things. I will talk to you next week. Ciao.